All right, I do believe we are live. Welcome everybody to Break the Rules, the stream that brings everybody from the internet together in order to have the best conversations that you have ever experienced. And we are going to be talking about the best form of government today. We've got some old people here, Chud Logic, Gnostic Informant. By old people, I do not mean an age, I mean an experience, because you guys are very well experienced in your fields, and today is no different with our new guest, Just the Facts. Welcome, Just the Facts. I'm a big admirer of your work. You have a lot of very interesting views, very unconventional, and very important to hear out. So before we begin, as always, everybody smash that subscribe button, smash that like button, click the bell. The bell clicking is extremely important. Share the stream out to everybody you know. Join the Discord and the Patreon, patreon.com/breaktherules. You're going to get a lot of beautiful magnets. If you guys are fans of magnets, you are going to get a lot of beautiful wooden magnets created by my father, Lev Polyakov, who you will see over here. Look at these things. Aren't they beautiful? Anyway, we're going to get started just with intros. Just the Facts. Since you are the new person here, I would love to hear a little bit about how you got started, why you chose politics, as well as being a man of culture. You know many languages. You know Hebrew, as does Gnostic Informant, by the way. You know Latin, you know German, very fluent in German. And what's the other one? Russian, of course. Вы говорите по-русски. So, Just the Facts, tell us a little bit about yourself, and we're just going to go from there.
So, I studied economics and political science in college, and that really gave me a new frame to understand the world. And, ever since I was pretty young, I remember looking at the various problems and thinking, well, here's how I would solve it, and I would come up with a long list in my head. And then I was thinking later on when I saw YouTube, hey, why not monetize this thinking? And, a bit later, here I am. How did I end with politics? Well, I started by doing media, and, it was okay, but really the politics videos is where it took off, so I've just responded to popular demand on that.
Excellent. And if you guys have not checked out his content, please check out his content as soon as you're finished with the stream. And also don't forget to sneak those super chats, because we're going to be reading super chats at the very end. So, Gnostic Informant, people know you more for the various religious, scholarly discussions that you have with a lot of experts, things that should be done in college. People don't really know you that much on the political end. How would you describe your politics, just to get us started?
Well, it's interesting that Just the Facts has said that he went to college for economics. I, too, actually have a modern economics degree from University of Buffalo. Before that, I was on the right, conservative Christian. My education in economics pushed me to the left, which is interesting. I guess everybody has their own interpretations of that. I'm not even sure where Just the Facts is. I didn't even hear him say where he is on that. But anyways,
we'll find out.
But yeah, we'll find out. But politically right now, I would consider myself as a center leftist. Yeah, just basically there. We can get into more details on it, on why I ended up there, and just if that's all you wanted to know for now, then yeah, that's it.
That is all I want to know. And finally, last but not least, Chud Logic, sporting
Hello.
the wrestler getup today. What is going on there? Why the wrestler?
I don't know. I didn't actually mean for this to be on, but it just kind of is on now. So I just, I'm going to TwitchCon next month, so I'm going to be on cam soon. So you'll get to see my lovely face.
I'm looking forward to that.
But good,
and
good,
maybe after that you can do like a camera on the entire time where now since... All right, there we go.
That's the plan. That's the plan.
All right, we're going to look forward to that. I'm going to toast some raw milk for everybody here for seeing
Whoa.
finally.
Is that a white supremacist thing?
It is very delicious Malacco, as they say in the Clockwork Orange universe. But anyway, we are going to get started. Chud Logic, I know that your view is more, let's say, on the mainstream, or rather straight and narrow, when it comes to the way we would have the best kind of government. But this has all been inspired by Just the Facts' video based on, what the perfect government would be like, and I want to go over that. So I don't know, Just the Facts, where you would want to start. I know that the very first part of it has to do with getting rid of all political parties. So is that something that is more of like a fantasy setting where, you know, all of your cohorts would take over your government and you would institute it? Or is this something that can actually be done? Like, how would you, where would you categorize that particular vision?
I think that the answer is on the far end, you know, having all political parties just completely annihilated. That's more something where it's just theory jerking, like where would we ideally be? But, you know, that was the purpose of the video. What is the ideal government? So, but in terms of what's achievable right now, in terms of reducing partisanship, I think just taking an axe to think tanks and basically the modern media and trying to just completely reduce the number of people who make their livings off of stoking competition and stoking mutual hatred, because that's a very parasitic and very antisocial way to make your living. So I think that's what the new CEO of CNN is doing to some extent, and I've been following that. It has some promise, his new reforms there. So I think the answer is it depends how far you want to take it, and that's the answer to how utopian it is. Also, one quick answer to Neil. I would call myself non-ideological. You know, in my view, if you put a label on yourself, that tends to define how you do things. Because if I say, you know, I'm a right winger, you know, instead of thinking what is the correct solution to this problem, I'm going to think what's the correct right wing solution to this problem. Absolutely. And so, yeah, they actually have studies on this where they go like, as environmentally aware citizens, how do you view X? And then later on, they look at those same people and they see, oh, they see themselves and they act as more environmentally aware. So I just try and avoid labels altogether and say, you know, I'm unlabeled.
Sure. I'm down with that. Definitely.
Yeah, fair enough. So Chud Logic, this was one of the first things that you got very interested in him talking about. If this were to happen, what would you see as being the, as Thomas Sowell likes to say, the unintended consequences?
Well, I mean, this might be partially answered by the fact that essentially what you're advocating for is a monarchy, from the sounds of it. But you're saying you want to abolish political parties. If you've got a legislative body that doesn't have political parties and everyone is just an individual, it's going to be very difficult for there to be any unity with which to get policy passed, because one role that a political party solves is essentially a wrapper for various politicians, and pressure could be put from like whips for politicians to vote a certain way on a policy in order to get policy passed, you know, and put into law. So I guess one kind of thing I saw straight away is like, are you not concerned that you would have all these different politicians arguing and not getting anything done if they don't have a unifying political party?
Well, I think that by having, you know, a large lower house in the area of like 1,000 or so people, you're diminishing the importance of any one individual. And it becomes a lot easier to put aside, you know, any particular bickerer, so to speak.
Oh, so you just have like 1,000 senators, essentially. Is that right?
Well, no. In this case, they'd be closer to the House of Representatives. Like, I'm talking about a lower house. An upper house, I elaborated on later in the video. I think that's where it's a good idea to have. Yeah, that's another topic, I guess.
So, Neil, what are your thoughts there on having a no party system whatsoever?
I just I try to I mean, I don't know how that would play out, as in like, because what would fill that void? It would just be like privatized behind the scenes parties that are like, okay, we're this party, but don't tell anybody. Like, you know, behind like in some back alley somewhere. Like I think it's a natural thing for parties to form, is what I'm getting at. So how would we like manipulate that? How would we sort of, you know, navigate that thing of like seeing who's going to form what? There's going to be people who form together. It's just part of natural tribalism, I guess.
That's true, but when you have the rules less formalized, it becomes less sticky, and it's easier for one person to switch from one party to the other. Right now, if you want to switch parties in the House of Representatives, even if you're just one of 435 people who really is irrelevant, that's a newspaper headline. But if it's just an informal organization, that makes it easier to sort of switch allegiances, and that's a good thing, because it should be something that we do to switch allegiances when we're proven wrong or when one quote-unquote party doesn't satisfy us. Furthermore, it's good to not polarize or partisanize all of society. And that's what happens when you have these formalized institutions with their formalized local fundraising and get out the vote initiatives. And that's what I would want to put the boot on, so to speak.
Yeah, that's definitely a tough problem that I think is like, how do you go about it? You know what I mean? Like, it's just the dichotomy, the dualism of left versus right. I don't think it's the greatest thing to have. I would agree. I just don't know how. I don't have a solution for that, to be honest. I wouldn't know what to do about it.
Well, one of the solutions that Just the Facts was talking about, which Chud, you alluded to just now, is having a monarchical system with certain caveats so that there would be certain checks to power. So just to remind people, Just the Facts, what would be the checks to power in the hereditary monarchical system that you would want to establish?
Okay, I'm going to keep it real. At least 50% of the reason I did that was because I came up with the idea of a royal seal for America, and I thought it would look good for merch. And so that's at least 25% LARP right there. Now, on the other hand, I do think it can work because, I mean, so this is coming off of Aristotle, right? This is all coming off of Aristotle. There are three forms of government: government by the one, government by the few, and government by the all.
I'll just read this.
And so ideally, we have a government that has elements of all of these, with checks and balances on each of them. So we should have a singular head of state. And who should elect them? Well, if it's everyone, then that's just I'm getting echo. I don't know. Then that's just another form of government by the all. So I was thinking, like, we should have a singular head of state with some authority that is chosen by the previous head of state, because that's how you get government by the one. Now, government by the one has its weaknesses, but it's accompanied by those other forms of government.
I mean, can I just, let's be real. You're delusional if you think this is ever something that is going to be of interest to American people, right?
Yeah, duh. I mean, like I said earlier, this is like the point of the video was what is the ideal government, not what is the most realistic government. What do I think the exact policies are that can be put through the current House of Representatives? Like,
well, let's play that tape through, because let's look back in history.
My ideal government is everyone gets $1 million. Who's up for it? Anyone?
Right, but let's go to his. I want to play this out. Like, we have one guy who's, he's sort of the head of everything. And let's like compare it to, I don't know, Augustus. Augustus did a good job of that. He had a 40+ year reign. He had his borders all extended. Everyone loved him. Everything was great. The Roman peace. But then down the line, a century later, you end up with the Nero, because you have to keep that succession going. And then you end up with insane people with all the power. And I just think it's inevitable for that thing to crash. That's my thoughts on that.
But surely an important aspect of any political ideology is how would you actually go about implementing it, or how would you actually go about bringing this about? Otherwise, you can just come up with any fantastical shit you want and go, yeah, my political idea is everyone gets a massive cock, and it just seems so pointless. It just seems like a waste of time.
To be fair with Just the Facts' idea here, it would involve a theoretical takeover of the government. And then you could say, well, how do you take over the government? I still classify that as being different than saying, well, everybody gets a giant dick and they get like those big breasts that Canadian teacher over there has. It's a different, but for real, like real ones.
That. All right. Anyway. So what? Yeah, I get what you're saying, but I think there's still some virtue to this theory crafting, because it's not so much how do you get this system into power. It's like, what system can you design to be stable? Like, so to speak, I remember one thing I heard from on Twitter once was a good system is one that's designed so that idiots can take over it and it still remains reasonably functional. So in my view, this system has checks and balances, and it's designed so that if it falls, or if one part of it falls, the rest of it can keep going. And that's an important thing to do, is to design things like that. Now, how realistic is it? What's the praxis? That's another question. But there is still some virtue in designing, like, how do we get the ideal checks and balances? How do we get stuff like that?
I actually think that and I know the United States is not perfect, but the system that's in place is designed to improve. We have the three branches of government. It does sort of check itself. I think that this democratic republic within a constitutional system with 3 branches of government it's what works the best, honestly.
But I guess the response to that, though, is like, do you not worry that the reason that you feel that way is because essentially you've been born into it and you've lived under it, and And I've
also compared it to past governments, theocracies, you know, monarchies, and it does seem like this is the way to go. Like, I mean, like you said before, I can think of something better, but like you said, how do we get to that? Oh, everybody gets $1 million. But we're here now, and it's realistic, and we can sort of look at it and compare it to what we had in the past.
Well, let's say, what are certain incremental things that could be done? I recall there was a video Just the Facts did talking about the redistribution of wealth in the private kind of way. That is one way for there to be like a competitive bank that people can make. But other than that, if we're talking about whatever way gets us to this not ideal, but like as good as possible type of government, my concern about the thing that Gnostic was pointing out earlier with having this one leader is not even that his descendants would suck. It's more that he would, or she, I mean, I don't, you know, that they would start.
Wait, hang on. No, wait,
yes.
Just the facts. Are women allowed or not? That's important.
Good point. Okay.
Just the facts. Women, yes or no?
Women, I don't know. God, that's a decent question. I mean, I'd go with, yeah, they're allowed. Just like until.
Oh. The hesitancy, man, it was not good.
I mean.
No, it's all right. Listen,
hey,
I mean, look, we had great.
I've got to be careful because, like, when I did a video that was like it was pro-Israel, but I lost a decent number of subscribers off of that. So it's like I got to be careful because I have an audience that's sort of kind of quote unquote based, but also my opinions occasionally go against that. And it's like every time I say something that contradicts that narrative, it's like I lose some people. So
that's the nature of it. Yep.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, I don't want to compare myself to someone who's obviously, you know, just the OG in this sphere, but it kind of like whenever I see Destiny go, like he says something that the left doesn't like, and then he loses some people. And I'm like, yeah, that's what happens when I say Israel good, you know?
Oh, hell yeah. But, well, that's not going to be new to some of the old school people here who have come from a lot more, let's say, extreme circles, even though I'm a Jewish dude. But anyway, when it comes to the point that I was bringing up earlier, though, when you have a leader and the leader gets surrounded, kind of like the scenario you just painted right now with having this audience of people who want you to skew in a particular way. If you are a leader who ends up being seduced by all of the yes men that are around them, or her, to act a certain way, that becomes a problem, because at that point you're just repeating your own propaganda. You're not addressing certain critical issues if you're constantly being fawned over by people that want to use you to rise up to a certain position in the political system. So that I see as being a very big problem with having any top-down leadership. What would be the check to that?
Well, the answer is that any sort of, you know, yeah, one leader can be corrupted. There's a corrupt form of government government by one, you know, tyranny. But there's also a corrupt form of government by the few, oligarchy, and there's a corrupt form of government by the many, which in some ways is what we have today, just an idiot mob. I guess it is a lot harder to overthrow tyranny and to, you know, sort of purify that without essentially negating the elements of government by one in government. But I would say it's all dependent on how it begins, sort of, you know, and how careful you are with who's the selected successor to the, I guess, monarch or just sovereign in general. You could do something like the, well, you know, in the transition phases from the French Empire to the French Republic to the French Empire, you had Napoleon was allowed to appoint his successor, but he wasn't technically a monarch. So something like that. Whoever the successor is chosen has to be chosen well, and the first person, how it begins, has to be the most critical element of getting a working government by one.
But again, just to be clear, I'm not talking about successors here. That's the important point, that you can have some system to get a good successor, but even if the successor's good, the problem is that whoever is in charge for however much time that they're going to be on this planet or whatever the limit is, whoever is in charge, they're going to be surrounded by people that are going to kiss their ass. How do you prevent that?
That's why Napoleon wrote the Napoleonic Codex, which is still common law in Europe today. It's basically the European version of what the founding fathers did in America with the Constitution. Which is why that's so important to have a constitution, so that anybody can be president or king, whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. That is the law. The law of the land remains, no matter who secedes.
Can we all agree on that?
And I definitely agree on the checks and balances on the government by one element as much as the government by all elements. There should be checks and balances on, but it's difficult to tell. You know, like, how do you get the advantages of a singular governor, like decisiveness and quick response, where you don't have to take everything to Parliament, while still keeping those particular checks involved?
So you want quick action, basically. You want stuff to just be done.
Well, I want that, and I want blocks against tyranny. So it's like you have to have.
That's the contradiction, though, because one of the benefits of fascism, or you know, dictatorship, is that you get stuff done quickly. But the downside is you don't have that oversight and you don't have the checks and balances. So I don't know how you'd have two at the same time.
Let's not forget the word fascism used to be a good word. It came from the Augustan era. The fascist symbol, the symbol of the bundle of sticks with an axe on it, that was a symbol of power united under one, you know, philosopher king, if you will. And that symbol was a symbol of like good power and strength. And now it's completely the opposite. So that's sort of like, to add to what Chud just said, like, it sort of does, you can't have it both ways. Either you give the power to somebody, or you're going to give away, and you're going to have tyranny with it. You're going to have it.
Well, that's the whole idea of checks and balances, is the compromise. You know, you can have decisiveness and also checks when it's necessary. And people said the same thing when they first saw the Constitution. You know, Patrick Henry was very vocal in his opposition to it. He said that the president would become a tyrant. But that's not what we see. We see sort of a spectrum from government by the few or government by the all and government by the one. And where we are in that is it determines which benefits of each you can get. And that's the whole idea of the compromise. I would say where we are on the spectrum right now, we're probably too far away from, I would say we're too close to government by the many, where everything has to go through all these various structures in order to get anything done. Although I would say that, you know, Dark Brandon is taking us closer to a dictatorial executive bureaucratic state.
Gnostic, you disagree. Oh, and by the way, we are definitely on the spectrum when it comes to this chat. Just wanted to throw that out.
Wait, so I kind of, when I'm hearing you say, like, okay, they had this idea of a president, people thought it would turn into a dictator, but it didn't. So I wanted to ask you, so what's wrong with the way that is? And then you also said, but then we have Dark Brandon, who looks like a dictator. So how much power do you want? Like, the idea of a president seems to be an idea that checks dictators, but also gives somebody power to do certain executive things. So what's the problem with that, is what I'm getting at.
I think the general idea is good, and this is what I've said in the past. But I think that right now we're too close to the government by the all, where it's impossible to get things done decisively. I think that the people and their elected representatives should have power to check the singular sovereign, but I think that right now it's a bit too much, and it gets in the way of getting things done. That being said, I do look at how Biden is taking things through the bureaucracy and through the courts and not paying as much attention to what the legislature has to say. But I think that's too informal for me. It's not based on a rule-based system, and I think that we should have similar exercises of power as he's doing, but it should be more formalized.
I guess, you know, I just don't understand how Biden, like, what specifically do you think he's doing that's kind of stepping around the checks and balances that exist in the American government?
I would say the total circumvention of immigration law by basically directing the Border Patrol to not do their jobs. And I would say the Inflation Reduction Act, just the abuse of the reconciliation process and sidestepping the Senate like that.
Okay. So, sorry, you're saying Biden has told Border Patrol to not do their jobs?
I mean, right? By not adequately enforcing the laws on the border, by not directing as much resources as the authors of those laws clearly intended them to have.
Yeah, I mean, I'm genuinely asking because I don't know, you know, much about Biden's fucking shit on the border. But yeah, I mean, that sounds pretty bad, obviously, to say to a whole fucking government department, "Oh, don't bother doing your jobs." You know, sounds like it's a free for all, right? Like, I don't know.
I mean, that is what a president can basically do through the bureaucracy. I mean, you can challenge it through the courts and the legislature, but that takes time.
But we still have one of the hardest systems becoming a citizen, which there still is a system in place. People don't just come here and just walk into the DMV and like get an ID. Like there's still takes years. We have one of the hardest systems in place of actually doing immigration.
I mean, of becoming a citizen, yes, but over the past, I don't know if it's 18 or like 16 months, but I remember reading something that said over the past 18 months, we've seen millions and millions come across the border. And that's a crucial part of the enforcement of the system because, yeah, you can't just walk into the DMV and get an ID unless you're in California, but you can absolutely still find work.
And I believe that in New York City, they've legalized the ability for, as they say, undocumented workers to vote. So there are breaches of the law that are going on right now. But my question, going back to Dark Brandon over here, is when you're saying that he does not want the border secured, can we trace this to a particular policy, a particular
sorry, I
person
don't think this is true. Yeah. Obviously, I'm doing it on the fly.
Okay.
Right. But according to this article I'm looking at here, in the fiscal year 2021, which included Biden's first 8 full months in office, Border Patrol recorded 1.66 million arrests. And the previous, which surpassed, so that's the all-time high for arrests at the border. So it seems a bit odd that you'd see Border Patrol arresting an all-time high number of people when apparently you're saying that Biden is saying, stand down and stand by. It doesn't seem to be the case. I mean, I don't know a massive amount of it. What evidence or data do you have to show that, Biden is doing this?
Well, the question of what is the amount that's been arrested is secondary to the question of what amount has crossed the border. And it's a lot more difficult to get reports on that. I've just Googled something, and I'm not sure what the exact, like you said, I'm doing also on the fly. And this analysis I see says 4.9 million have crossed since Biden took office. So that's a much lower percentage, I would think. I mean, you'd have to compare the percentages that have been under Trump and the percentages that have been under Biden and like the totals and the amount arrested. So.
Sure. But, I mean, yeah. I mean, we don't have to drill on it.
But what you're saying right now just shows the problem of having somebody in charge that would do all these various executive orders or whatnot that would not be able to be balanced out by the states. So wouldn't that be less in favor of the vision that you were talking about earlier?
Well, yeah. Obviously, anyone in the position of a sovereign who's completely corrupted is going to be doing bad things for the country, but that doesn't discredit the idea of government by one in the same way that a corrupted populace in general constantly set against itself, not able to really discern who's a good candidate, doesn't really discredit the idea of government by all. Like right now, under the current circumstances, I wouldn't trust someone that the people of this country elected to be their representative. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to think that they would act the same way if the current politicizing structures were removed and they were shown adequate, correct information. And in the same way, sure, Biden's not great, but I would trust someone who's more capable and more has greater integrity with his level of power.
Yeah, that's the problem right there. I mean, I can understand where it can definitely go right. I've expressed before my problems with the power corrupting over time, as some people in the chat have also expressed. But as far as, let's say you have somebody who does end up getting corrupted, how do you undo that? How much power would everybody else have?
I tell you one time that you deal with corruption, okay? One thing that you have in government, right? And that is term limits. So it means that even if someone has got some fucked up shit going on, there's a limitation on how much damage they can do because they're only going to be in office for a certain amount of time. And then there's another election, And I think the US, one thing they got right is one person can only ever serve 2 terms as president. I think that's a great idea. But you throw that all out the window when you give someone a lifetime appointment because they could potentially engage in that corrupt behavior. And this is what you see in times past, in monarchies past, You could have the most corrupt person in charge, but hey, they were born into the right fucking body, so they get to reign terror for a fucking long period of time.
Though to be contrary to that, JTF did point out, and I don't want to speak on his behalf, but just as a quick teaser, you were pointing out before in your videos that the people who have the term limits, they end up working for a lot of these various entities that court favor with the government and are able to help them out in return for help on their end. And that's also a problem that you see as eliminating term limits actually incentivizing them not to do.
Yeah. I mean, basically, lifetime appointments, if you look at things like the Supreme Court, what's the point of a lifetime appointment on the Supreme Court? Well, the idea is you're not as vulnerable to outside pressure. You're not as vulnerable to a mob coming up and telling you this is what we need to do, and then you make a terrible decision. The point of someone in a lifetime appointment is that they can make the unpopular decisions, and that's important for a head of state just as much as it is for a judge.
But the problem is the Supreme Court has got a very narrow purview in terms of what it actually does. It just essentially determines and rules on whether something is constitutional or not at a very base level. So, you know, I think that it's fine to have a lifetime appointment for maybe an organization that's got a particularly narrow view on what it does. And, you know, they want to remove the political influences because they're saying, Supreme Court, we want you to determine is something constitutional or not. And we want to base your decision purely on your reading and understanding of the Constitution, you know, not on the political kind of influences. So that's fine. I think if you've got someone, though, whose remit is very wide and they could essentially do, well, I mean, I don't know exactly what you're thinking of that this person could do precisely, but certainly it'd be wider than what the Supreme Court does. Yeah, they're obviously going to be in a position to potentially wreak havoc for the entirety of their lives. You know, pull a Nero, for example. I don't know.
Well, first of all, I wanted to bring this up earlier, but Nero is slept on as a good Roman emperor. Like, like you could have brought up Commodus earlier, Neil, but Nero, I am a Nero stan. I will defend Nero to the end. So you should have come up with a better example than that.
Because he caused the Jewish revolt. He robbed the Jewish temple and caused a Jewish revolt and put the whole Eastern Roman Empire in shambles.
I mean, if you need money,
it was the end of the Jewish bloody line. They had a 4-year emperors in 1 year because of that. It was giant wars everywhere. It was Nero's fault. That's why
Nero's
I said
fault or the Senate around him. Anyways, but the point is,
that's the same thing they're talking about fucking Putin, by the way. That's the excuse a lot of Russians make that say, well, it's only the bad oligarchs that are around Putin that are causing. They said the same shit about Stalin. But anyway, I'm not going to go on.
Yeah, but you see, the thing is, they blame the oligarchs in that case because the oligarchs are on his side and they say, oh, he's implementing their policies badly. No, I say the Senate was against Nero and was in his way. Anyways,
madman.
Oh, sure. That's Caligula. Anyways, but the point is,
he was too.
But the point is, yeah, you. But my. Anyways, we started on. We're talking.
The problem with absolute power, you get Caligulas and Neros, you get all these mad, crazy people who think they're gods and want to be worshipped. I mean, that's what happens.
Anyways, just back to the point earlier. What I'm saying, generally speaking, is that the same rationale for having someone on the Supreme Court, which is, you know, you need to be immune to outside pressure in order to make hard decisions. That applies to a head of state, surely. And, you know, I mean, we can debate whether or not the countervailing rationale, which
wait.
Someone yeah.
Sorry, I just want to say, heads of state absolutely do need to be influenced by, like, political externalities, right?
Sometimes they don't. Sometimes the people are...
Well, no, because we want them to do what the people want to do, surely. If they're not concerned for political externalities, they could just say, right, let's fucking mass it. Let's do a Thanos snap and kill half the people. Fuck it, who cares?
Like, sometimes, look, I will defend to the death the virtue of having the broader masses and their elected representatives participate in government. But at the same time, sometimes they absolutely do not know what is best for them. Like, let's come on here. We've seen the people, broadly speaking, support in opinion polls just stupid policy decisions.
I agree. The people are stupid. I agree with that sentiment. But I guess my thing is like, but the thing is, if you're giving someone this hereditary, thing, how can you be sure that this person that's making the decision is equipped to do that? Because it's just based on a bloodline, which seems crazy to me. Like, it's just like fucking Winston Churchill said. You know, democracy is the worst form of government, except all the other forms that have been tried. I think there's a lot of truth to that.
That's well said.
Based on a bloodline.
I mean, it's based on the exclusion of basically everyone except one person from power. And that's an important point, because when you do that, you can see things a lot more clearly when you're not having to satisfy all these various interests, when you remove mob mentality from the equation.
No, I do think that Just the Facts does have a point there. Not to say that I agree with the solution, but Chud, you'd have to agree that is a pretty big problem, where people who are in power get influenced by various lobby groups. That's no good either. So the question is, how do we avoid that from poisoning their, the way they govern?
Obviously, I'm not like a massive stan of like lobby groups or anything like that. Obviously, I've got a lot of criticism of lobbying, but I think when you do have a system that, I think everyone's got a right to assert their own perspective on what they think should happen. So whilst I think there's maybe some control,
that's why I want a legislature, but I don't want the legislature to have all the power. It's sometimes, yes, the people should absolutely push the government to do things their way. However, there should be a certain point where one person who can see things clearly, who's isolated from the material consequences and can see the immediate material consequences and can see the long term, can just say, no, that's a stupid idea. We're not doing that.
Before we sorry,
go on, I just want to say just really, don't you worry though that there's been many times in history where we've had this set up and there has been this sort of person that's been able to determine outside of political influence in some cases, like, what the path should be. And it's led to great hardships and great, atrocities being committed because they are so isolated from the common person. Like, do you not think that you're just essentially recreating, a dictatorship and all the things that come with that?
Well, that'd be a pretty long survey of history to determine, what's the number of times that a single person in power has managed to correctly stop the people wanting or doing a stupid thing, and what's the number of times in history that they themselves have been the bad influence. That'd be like, you could write a book on that. But broadly speaking, right now, I'm more concerned about the people doing stupid things than a singular person in charge.
Sure. So, okay, would an easier solution, rather than completely restructuring politics, be to find some way or method to improve people's knowledge and understanding of issues in order to allow them to make, better decisions?
Yes, absolutely. I believe in, improving but it's not sustainable. It's not long-term. It's not something you can do all the time because there's always going to be the immediate material consequence of whatever's going on that can push people to do things that are bad in long-term. So I think you do need that long-term check in the form of one person who is isolated, who isn't vulnerable to this mob mentality. I think it's just a necessary check.
Yeah, okay.
Now, what about the legislature? Because from what I understand in the United States, it used to be the case that while the House of Representatives was voted on, the Senate was not.
Well, that's not entirely correct. The Senate was voted on by the state legislatures themselves.
Gotcha, yes.
So, the Founding Fathers read the same books that I do when I'm talking about this. It's about government by the one, the few, and the all. And the idea was that the few, in this case, would be the senators. They would be the collective speed bump to any bad ideas coming through the House of Representatives. So I have a similar idea, but I think that it should be more of like a house by experts, a house of experts, so to speak. Just like a legislative body of statisticians, philosophers, and obviously through my own bias, economists.
How do you get those people to stop doing their professions like statisticians?
Here it comes.
They're in their fields doing their work. I mean, a lot of them are represented by politicians, which I agree. Politicians can be very corrupt and dirty. But like, how do you get those people just to stop doing their jobs and that are improving the world to become politicians?
Well, keep in mind, if I go to like the Harvard, Department of Economics or whatever, and I go to their top professor and I say, look, you'll be one of 100 people that's going to have a lifetime appointment to this legislative body, and you're going to use your expertise to influence every piece of legislation. The vast majority of the people like that want their expertise to be used. They want their legacy, and they want, publishing. They want to be remembered. And that's a way to get remembered. That's definitely how you get that. And the second part of that would be high salaries.
Okay, how much are we paying these people?
Well, I mean, $1 million a year, that's like pennies on a national budget. Like, keep in mind, we have a $4 trillion per year in federal spending. We can afford to have 100 people live in luxury.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Why not?
No, well, if you were to dig deeper into here, what problem would you see would come up if something like that was legislated?
You asking me or?
Oh, no, I'm asking Chud Logic. Oh, and by the way, we are going to be doing super chats at the end. I know I'm a major shill, but everybody sneed your super chats. We're going to do those at the end. But yeah, Chud Logic, what do you think
sorry,
about...
what?
Yeah.
What did you say? I didn't hear the question. Go again.
Oh, sure. Okay, so the question was, what exactly do you see as being the potential problem with that kind of legislative system? Because you were like, oh, okay, but it almost feels like there is a part of you that wants to push back or see some kind of a potential problem with having that kind of system, or are you satisfied with that?
Like... Well, no, I mean, obviously, I just, I think the idea of paying these people $1 million per year seems like, it's a lot of money. I mean, maybe it could be afforded within the government budget or something like that. But yeah, so basically what it is, so basically you're saying you're going to give a lifetime appointment to someone, and they're philosopher, economist, whatever. They get a lifetime appointment of 100 people here. They all get paid $1 million per year until they die. And they basically make a decision about whatever policy they want to, but there's no outside influence. So they're not lobbied by anyone. They just come to the determination based on their own perspectives, right?
That's the general idea.
Okay. How do you choose these people?
Well, so
that's a good question.
I mean, in the initial beginning of the system, you're going to have problems. It's the same thing as who do you choose for sovereign? It has to be just choosing these people moderately arbitrarily based off, well, not arbitrarily, but based off, they're standing in academia, they're standing in, how many things have they published, how notable are they in their field. After that, once people start dying off, I'm thinking you can have these people appoint themselves, sort of, have them vote on who will take the seat of whoever just died. And I had also thought of, these people you could more or less remove. Like, if, say, your lower house votes 2/3 to remove a particular member of that house, that's a system that's more or less, that works.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, you'd have to have some sort of means to appoint these people initially. How much are we gonna pay those people that are appointing them?
It is a good question.
Yeah, that's a decent question. I mean, like, what I was focused on with this video was getting, a stable system that, like, it's.
I feel bad because it's like your idea.
An equilibrium, an equilibrium, right? Once you get to this local equilibrium, you're not going to be moved around much in any other direction. It's like a little Lagrange point. But how you get there, that's not the focus of the video, so to speak. And
yeah, sure. I feel like, you put this video out and I've watched it and I saw this about there, and then we're just here kind of, trying to pick it apart and stuff. It feels a bit one-sided, but
no, I think what would be more balance here is not to pick it apart, but to see what certain aspects of it do need to be brought to the fore as something that is a tangible thing that we can work on.
Sure.
Like I
mean, that's kind of the conversation we're having, I guess, and the pitfalls. I just find it, obviously conceiving of like a way that we can run the government is fine as like a theoretical concept. But I guess my perspective is just beyond being able to implement it or thinking about a path forward to put it in place. And apply that to any sort of lefty that talks about some sort of communist revolution or some shit. Like it's fucking delusional. I think if you look at the circumstances of most people in America, people are generally, I think, quite happy with their lot in life. And I don't think people have a fervor for, really fundamental, massive change. I think most people are happy with like an incremental progress forward, whatever that may look like for the person.
Speaking of the progress forward, what I've noticed from Just the Facts, which is very refreshing, is that you are by no means a doomer and a gloomer. a lot of your videos talk about the emerging technology, Elon Musk, space lasers, things of that nature. And I think that it is very refreshing, because a lot of people who talk about there being a monarchy or some kind of a system where the leader is not going to be influenced by special interests, at the same time, they bemoan the present and they talk about how corrupted and degenerate everything is today, and they don't see any light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to especially anything technological. So in that way, I think you really do stand out and do give us a lot of hope.
Well, I think you've kind of got it backwards just a bit, because I more address that stuff to people who are absolutely excited, like, hell yes, it's gonna collapse. Billions will die. I will be the warlord and institute my new base ideology over everyone. And so I'm not being optimistic so much as I'm telling those people to be a bit more pessimistic. Like, don't assume that the system is going to collapse. And
their optimism is our pessimism, you could say. So I understand what you're saying, but it's like, of course, they like it. They think that they like it, just like the commies think that they're going to be, the farty officials and will tell everybody else what to do.
I mean, it's more that I'm saying, like, even if that were the case, even if, hypothetically, you could become a warlord in the warlord era America, after the collapse or something, you would have to put in the work to make that happen. Because right now, where things are, if you look at the trend lines, we're not headed towards a collapse. We're not probably even headed towards a notable depression type economic downturn. And I think that the number of people that just think it's all headed towards collapse, like, I'm on Twitter a lot, I have this lurking alt where I follow people, and I just, you see people take it as just a foregone conclusion that it is going to collapse. Like, it is going to happen, and yet
I don't think so.
It's just not where the trends are going.
You know what I think is a genius thing that it's given? We don't even realize how amazing, how great this is case law. We have this system of case law where things can change socially incrementally through case law. When something happens to somebody, they go to the Supreme Court. They have a landmark case, and now that becomes the law of the land. That's how you get I think the case law thing, it gets we take it for granted how important it is, and that's how you get you can get a lot of progress from that. If that made sense. I think I butchered that, but
I think I see where you're coming from with that. Oh, I'm getting some feedback from somewhere.
Oh, not really sure where. But anyway, when it does come to your
No,
view
wait,
of,
sorry,
yes?
no, I had a response.
Okay, go for the response, yes.
Okay, sorry, right. What I wanted to say is this, okay?
Yes.
On both, I'm gonna do the big brain center of shit. But on both sides, the far left and the far right, or wherever that may be, there's definitely people who see some sort of like, day of the rope or revolution. They see it as like almost like a rapturous event, and it's almost like religious to these people. They kind of diligently follow this idea that the day is going to come, that something is going to happen to bring about the end of current civilization, and a new civilization is going to come in its place. And I think that is very antithetical to like any material analysis you do of the world. And I think that there's just the structure and system we live under is very good at self-correcting, and it's very good at correcting for the mistakes that happen. And I just think anyone out there who truly believes we're on the verge of some sort of dreadful collapse in the West is just absolutely fucking delusional. And, it's just a lot of Twitter LARPing, thinking, yeah, I'm going to be, the chief manufacturer of fucking, military clothing for the Red Army after the thing. Or, I'm going to be like a fucking warlord of Chicago, I'm going to reintroduce slavery and a bunch of black people.
Where I tell you how to survive the apocalypse.
Yeah, exactly. And I just think that kind of thinking is just.
It's funny because it sounds a lot like the Christians with what they say about the rapture and all that. It's very similar, but it's funny.
Well, what I think will happen is we are going to have VR devices that people are going to wear, where the communists will get to live out their dream as a card-carrying member of the United States Communist Party, and the Baptist is going to live out their dream with a traditional anime furry waifu, riding on the horse with them, and everybody, the Christians are going to get theirs, and everybody's going to get theirs. So that is, though, a problem that I see approaching. Now, I don't know just the facts what you think about this aspect of it. If we get too comfy as far as having any desire that we want fulfilled through a virtual reality device, how do you think that is going to change society? Is this something I'm overthinking?
You're definitely not overthinking it. Oh, it's impossible to overthink this because this is such a huge thing. Like, where do we end up with like Neuralink? Like when it's basically Cyberpunk 2077, but real. When in your brain you can link to the internet. What happens when every person gets 1,000 IQ supplemented through a chip in their brain? What happens when we get biological immortality? People are talking about the end of aging now as a more concrete thing. Like, we understand that now better than we ever have, and we're seeing more and more progress in that direction. We are going to see massive technologically driven social revolutions within this century, and anyone that looks to previous centuries as an example for what's going to come next is really missing the mark. Whatever we're going to see in the future, it's not going to be like what we've seen before, and VR will definitely be a part of that. And escapism, as that increases, as people try to avoid, in some ways, the boredom of what's going on in the world today, people are going to seek more imagined conflicts and more petty stuff just to drive that search for meaning. Like back in a few centuries ago, you would have had a clan war. Today, you have a Twitter war. It's just a dramatic shift.
I think as well, you see the endless commodification of every single aspect of our lives to insane degrees. Even aspects of our personal lives now are commodified to like a very fine degree. And I think that is very placating for a lot of people. You can just spend money to get whatever base desire you wish fulfilled. And I think people just are kind of fairly happy with how their lives are, and they're just not.
To tie this back into the government question, though, and then I'm gonna okay.
The technology thing, I think we get so scared about it, but like, I mean, this has always been a fear people have had even before computers and the internet. What's going to happen when the internet comes? Everyone's going to have too much information. It's going to be chaos. But really, these are tools that help us, and I think that it's just inevitable. It's part of human evolution. It's going to happen. We will adjust to it. It's just our nature to adjust to things.
So I absolutely agree. This is the reason I'm anti-Luddite, and this is the reason I'm against Ted Kaczynski. Despite again, I'm going to lose 10,000 subscribers for that. But the point is, yeah, it's inevitable. Luddites always lose, but it is going to cause tremendous upheaval, because if you look at how the agricultural revolution changed things, if you look at how the industrial revolution changed things, obviously these are going to be massive upheavals that leave a lot of people behind and create new societies that look nothing like the ones that came before. And I think this new one that's coming with the end of aging and Neuralink and stuff like that is going to be up there with that previous stuff. I mean, anyone that's looking at stuff like collapses and warlord eras and civil wars and states seceding is not looking in the right direction. They're looking at the past when they should be looking at the future.
Is it fair to say that people are getting stupider?
No.
People are losing their attention spans, I think. And this is what, I mean, the two are linked, because if you look at the sort of content that people consume, we've gone from like long blog posts to short YouTube videos to tweets and TikToks. You can't, like, if I get the same dopamine from a 60-second TikTok or a 10-second to read tweet as I do from a long video essay, and if I can pack the information that much smaller, I'm losing my attention span. I can't read about something in depth, and then that creates consequences where it's difficult to absorb new information, serious new information, and I think that's happening on a societal scale.
But I also think that if you look at, we still have the same brain capacities we had 1,000 years ago. We're using it in different ways, though. So even if we are losing, let's say, our ability to like pay attention longer, we're probably using that somewhere else. Like the people who lived in 10,000 BCE can survive outside and hunt and do what they have to do, and we couldn't. If we went back in time, we'd be screwed. We would have no idea what we were doing. We'd be killed, eaten by a lion in seconds. We'd be stupid compared to them. But we're in a different time now, and our intelligence is still, it's pretty much the same brain capacity, but we're just using it in different areas. So that's just how it naturally is, I think.
I would disagree, because you're talking about a different set of ideas right now, as opposed to a different way of processing information more fundamentally. If you're talking about like someone right now who's studied survivalism and such in the same way that you would study it for like the past few centuries, you know, through books and through really practice and stuff like that, you take them back then, they'll probably do okay. You take someone who's more modern and they absorb information in a more short form manner. They are more used to short form content. They're going to do more poorly in any situation, like academic situation, whatever. They're not going to be able to understand stuff as in depth. And it's a fundamental change, because you're going from the way we've done things from now or until now is like long form. You know, we read books, we take long practice over years to really develop our talents. Whereas in the modern day, it's just, I read a very short period of information. I read short information and then I move on. My attention span is lower and I can't develop a skill in the same way. And I think that's fundamentally concerning.
Do you also think, and I want to get Chud Logic's opinion in this as well, do you also think that the short attention span is going to change the system of government that people are going to be in?
I don't know. I think that as this stuff kind of, I mean, I think there is a lot of distractions that exist now. I think if you look, say, you know, in the 50s and 60s, it probably was more common that people would stay more abreast of like the news. They'd buy a newspaper, they'd read up on what's going on, they'd have more takes on the politics and stuff like that. I think now there's so much fucking gunk that fills our mind from social media. You know, there's fucking TikTok hashtags about people with fake dissociative identity disorder, or fucking some celebrity trash. You know, I think this stuff kind of fills everyone's brains, and you know, there just isn't, people feel like they don't have time to look at this stuff. And in some cases that's true, they're working, they've got families and stuff like that. But you know, I think a lot of this short attention span stuff just means people get pushed towards stuff that fits that format better, which is kind of schlocky bullshit, you know, not substantive, meaningful things. So I think we're going to see, as time goes on, people are probably going to become less and less interested in politics.
But as far as those who are interested in, one big concern that I have about both like the online, you know, far right and the far left is that if you are somebody who develops an audience, and this is also why I'm a big fan of all three of you guys here, because I've noticed that people who lean on one very specific direction, when they start getting followers, the followers start to reinforce certain things that they then have to double down on. And as a result, it's way harder to find like a nuanced opinion on any topic.
Like H3.
Yeah, I mean, it's the classic thing of an ideologue, right? It's like, obviously, you know, Destiny and Nick Fuentes have been talking recently, which has caused much conversation. But the reality is, you know, Nick Fuentes can't come out and say, even if he genuinely changed his mind on a position, he is financially invested now at the point of having a business.
Nick Fuentes cannot come out. But anyway.
Wait, what does that mean?
No, sorry, go ahead.
It's a joke.
Go ahead.
Okay,
it's a goof.
Well, he actually,
got
it. There's a screenshot of one of his videos where he pulls up he's sharing his screen on the internet.
God.
And he's looking at tea porn.
Yes.
But, you know, I think
you better watch out. Your YouTube channels, his days are numbered.
Uh-oh.
He's coming for you both now.
Talk about spilling the tea.
But I think, you know, but you know, there's this concept of this idea of like platform capitalism, which is essentially where platforms like YouTube, etc., give us our digital land to operate on. You know, we're pseudo serfs essentially operating on, you know, the good of the Lord, aka YouTube. And I think it ends up in a position sometimes where, people are so invested in their political opinion because their viewers and followers are expecting certain political takes that, you know, it's like they want it. They're the audience, they're the market for it essentially. And people just keep pumping those takes out and they just swallow it up. So it creates this kind of feedback loop where with some people you think, you know, do you genuinely believe all of this stuff? Like, it's so funny that you've got all the exact takes that your audience want you to have. And that's why I really like, you know, I get on well with someone, you know, Short Fat Otaku. I get on really well with him because, you know, he is willing to go against the righties in his audience and he is willing to say shit that pisses them off, you know, and I really respect that because, you know, even though he's kind of a centrist mainly, you know, it just shows that he's not beholden to his audience and he is willing to say, no, actually, guys, I think this and I don't give a fuck what you think. This is my perspective on it. And I think that's, you know, a good sign of someone who isn't an ideologue, like someone like, say, Hassan or whoever that's just selling whatever their audience wants to hear.
And that's somebody who is able
back.
to make a certain amount of success online. The only thing, like we were talking about H3H3, for example, and when he reached a certain point right now that I don't know if he would have been able to reach if he would have been, slightly more, slightly more like what he was in the past. It almost seems like he had to let a lot of those qualities go for the sake of appealing to the Hollywood crowd that he's in with right now. So if we are talking about mass appeal, whether we're talking about Trump, whether we're talking about whichever politician is going to AOC, by the way, she's not going anywhere. And she was, by the way, just the facts on your tier of like what was that called? Like
manipulators tier. I said that she was a pretty good manipulator. Anyways, one thing that I would slightly push back on is, I mean, you got, again, someone like Destiny who's willing to absolutely die on the hill of saying the N-word, and he still has a very good audience of leftists, and he'd probably be a much more notable force. I mean, he's been around a long time. He still has a very large audience. He would probably be a much more notable force if he never discovered Twitter and didn't, shitpost there like he has. But I mean, there absolutely is a room for non-ideological or non-totally ideological people on YouTube and other platforms, and I think he's proven that.
Okay, I see where you're coming from. I guess I would just say it's like a comparative thing, because whilst Destiny does, normally get between sort of 3, 5, 6, 10K viewers on like a good day if he's covering something crazy. He's had a lot covering the Twitch drama recently, but in any case, I think if you compare it to someone like Hassan, who I think we'd agree is a hardcore ideologue, like to an extreme degree, like you can know one of his political takes and every single one falls into line exactly as it should, boom, 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 boom. So, I think he garners a massive audience because he just kind of stakes it out. And I think the reason that people like that get such a big audience is because people can go there and they're just going to hear what they want to hear. They're not really going to be challenged significantly, They're just going to go. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I get that. I think that's more down to networking rather than anything else. Hassan is not a massive autist who absolutely sets off massive wars against completely everyone, and doesn't say the most outrageous stuff on Twitter. So I would say, yeah, that's the difference right there.
Yeah, sure. But I agree with you that, I do think there is definitely room for more kind of nuanced perspectives and stuff like that. So, yeah. Sure.
Yes, so going back to the original theme, which is going through Just the Facts' ideal government video, we've covered the legislature, we've covered having a descendant. So all that, I think we understand where we're at. As far as democracy itself goes, as far as the people go, the plebiscite, I don't really know what the right word for it is, the House of Representatives, I guess, would exist today. What would be the way that you would handle that?
I've said before, 1,000 people from like districts of equal population and ranked choice voting. It's a simple thing. Representing the people is not difficult. A standard parliament system with the ranked choice voting, which is more representative. That's basically just it. That's all you need, as long as you get rid of the parties which politicize the people. So, but we talked about that.
Yeah. What would they be like? What sort of things would that branch of government? What would they do? What would they be responsible for?
Yeah. You need to get sort of more into the technical stuff. I guess, God, you just have to do like legislation in general. I mean, I haven't thought it through to the extent of, this chamber will have power over X, Y, and Z, and then this chamber will have the power to overrule them in cases alpha, beta, and chi. That's something I'll admit I haven't gotten into. Okay.
No, sure, that's fair enough. Yeah.
But do you imagine that with that kind of system, we're going to have maybe more localized rule that's not going to be as affected by the federal government, or do you see the federal government having a stronger role in the state government having a stronger role in the daily life of the people within it?
So I dislike the idea of, state governments in general. I like municipal governments and I like national governments, but I don't like state governments or regional governments. I just feel like they breed regionalism too much and they just accelerate division in a pointless manner. What I would say is, you want local governments, which can have a decent amount of money to spend and have a reasonable amount of autonomy. And people can actually be involved in them and make a difference in a way that they can't at their state level or their national level. So I definitely prefer the approach of just having a national government and local municipal government, and you don't really need an in-between.
Chud?
I mean, I guess it's going to depend on the size of the country. I think one of the big legislative issues in America, one of the biggest political issues in America, is it's such a big fucking country. So, you know, this is the why the states thing comes up, right? Because obviously what works in California isn't necessarily going to work in Texas, isn't necessarily going to work in whatever fucking state exists on the other side.
Different interests.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that it would be more reasonable to think that just effects political concept could come into effect if you and you could have it set up in that way if you were to split America up in a certain way, so as you didn't have such a wide and disparate group of states and people trying to work under one unified banner. But again, I'm not sure how well that will go down with people.
But if go on.
What I would say is that's why you give power to local municipal governments, because what works in Northern California doesn't work in necessarily Southern California. So I would divide it even further and remove the idea of like political division within the nation, because you're not going to divide the whole country for the sake of your municipality, but you are going to work within your municipality to improve things in a way that you might get detached from it at the state level. And one thing that I had as an idea was, we could have municipalities sort of join quasi-states as like short-term things, make it so that every municipality can join or leave a state as they like, and, a voluntary association with its own legislature and its own rules, but the municipalities can leave as their identities shift, sort of. But on the other hand, that sort of legitimizes division across the whole nation, which is not something you want to do.
I was gonna say that we have it set up where imagine if there was a one world government, right, without any states, just like a giant one country with one leader. I mean, this would be terrible. Like, how would people just speak different? People have different languages. People have different interests. People have different ideas. Now, that's on a large scale. That's on a macro scale. But if you bring it down to like the region of North America, for example, United States, Canada. Even in that area of land, you're going to have people you're going to have farmers in the middle of the country. You're going to have city people over here. You're going to have this people. So the idea of having states divided up to protect people's state interest, I think is just the natural, the best way to do it.
Do you think that states would have more of an ability to get things done as far as having enough resources to get it done, as opposed to the smaller municipalities? Would that be a good argument for the states? And just the facts, I don't know if you would reject that or not.
Right. Well, that was addressed to two people, but I'm the only one talking. So, yeah, that could be a reasonable argument, which is why you could have, more voluntary states that you would join to get access to those resources, but they would shift over time so that you don't get a solidified natural power with permanent protections, because that is the sort of thing that tends to lead towards sectarianism and stuff like that. And I just think if it's more fluid, if like a municipality could join state A one year and state B the next, maybe that's better for the overall cohesiveness of the nation and also getting them the resources they need. But I mean, keep in mind, municipalities that don't have a lot of wealth won't need a lot of wealth to catch up. And even if you have regionalism, you can still have the central government address particularly dilapidated regions like the Tennessee Valley Authority and such.
So one thing that we did not get to is military, and this would be the last part that you were not really addressing in that video, but I think it is an important part of it. Like, I recall Starship Troopers, where they had that law that only citizens are people who serve in the military, and they're the only ones who can vote. What would be your take on what would make a good military for the best government we could possibly have, as far as who gets in, how it functions, all that stuff?
So I think right now, like, if you look at the militaries of the world, they've mostly abandoned conscription, because when you saddle a military with people who do not want to be there, things go poorly for them. Every single time, like, you try and send convicted people, you have given them the option of prison or the Marines. They go to the Marines, bad things happen for them and the Corps. So it's just bad in general. You want a volunteer-based system, and you don't want to lock things behind service, strictly speaking. I mean, maybe you do need pay increases. I mean, currently you have soldiers on food stamps, so that's not a good situation. But, you know, you probably want, like, maybe for higher honors, like, if we gave every Medal of Honor recipient, like, a couple $1 billion, you know, you could afford that within the current system of having trillions of dollars to spend. No, really, because $1 billion is just 1/4 of 1,000 of what we spend. We could afford to really reward people for their valor, so to speak. And so, I mean, that's something you could do. But I think broadly speaking, America's figured out how to have an effective military. I mean, you hear a lot of horror stories, but that's only because of the transparency. In other places without transparency, it's even worse.
It's because of the transparency. But anyway, go on.
God.
Sorry, I had to.
Oh my God, we're getting into the trans discourse.
Okay.
No, we don't have to. It's all good. Listen, we all know. Listen, the fucking TOS is like an eye of Sauron. Even for me as a lefty, I'm like, I don't want to talk about the fucking trans stuff.
I just don't want to get like pigeonholed into one side or the other. It's like, you know, if I start talking about that, it'll be like, aha, so now you're on our side. All right, now talk about bummer. I don't want that one.
Indeed.
No, I don't.
No, I would just say it like this, that the people who are complaining about today's military and look towards the Russian military, for example, I think that they've already proven that they are full of shit, because there is no comparison whatsoever as far as how the Russians are doing things compared to the Americans, regardless of anything that they perceive as being sort of weakening or having lower standards as far as admissions. Like, I heard certain things about that from a friend of mine who's in the army right now, where he said that in order to accommodate female soldiers, they had to lower the standard for certain physical exercises, for certain training, and that's not great.
I don't think
but you what? You don't think that's true?
No.
Well, okay, I'm gonna have to check back with him and see if he can give me some proof.
Female soldiers have always had different standards from male soldiers. Like if you look at PT tests, and you can just Google this very easily, you'll see there's a female standard for how many push-ups you have to do and a male standard. So, you know, that's, I don't know how much that is.
I think his point was that all the standards were lowered. Let me find that message from him. Let's see.
Here's one thing that might be interesting in that regard. You know, back in the Iraq global war on terror era, you had the military couldn't see your medical records. They were sealed. So, you know, you could just lie and say you didn't have any conditions, and as long as they didn't come out like it wasn't a physical condition, you'd be fine. But in the modern era, they have access to everything. So if you were on antidepressants for a couple months, a couple years ago, you know, diagnosed depression, sorry, you know, you've completely beaten this, but gone. Now it's, I mean, so that's an increased standard. And I don't know, that goes against it, I guess.
Yeah,
okay.
It's actually there was just the standards for women itself that went down, not all of them. But they were trying to have more women become soldiers. I mean, I don't see a problem with that. More women being soldiers doesn't make the people on the top who are like really doing shit get worse for some reason. It's just having more people, more jobs. It's just having more help. This
is the thing, right? People were comparing the ad campaigns of like the Russian military and the US military, right? All that gay shit that they were doing for the US military is not indicative of the structure or what the US military is like. Okay, that's just fucking advertising, because clearly they want more fucking queers in the army. Okay. Like, that much is obvious, right? I think the truth is that, you know, the American military is renowned around the world, rightly so, for being a very well-oiled, slick machine, and it's got a fucking shitload of funding as well. Right. I just want to say, I'm not sure. So the thing is, you say you studied economics. I just find it surprising that someone who studied economics, admittedly, I don't know much about the field, would suggest that you could make a billionaire out of Medal of Honor recipients. Like, you know, you keep pointing to government spending, and yes, I agree, government spending is high, but government spending is high because they're spending it on things that they feel that they need to spend money to for the benefit of the country, right? Broadly speaking, that's the mentality. So they put a lot of money into the military because they offer something back, protection for the state, you know, pursuing foreign policy goals, whatever. But if you just give $1 billion to some Medal of Honor recipient, like, they've just got $1 billion then. Like, what is that? How does that benefit the country?
Well, I mean, it benefits more the military because it, you know, promotes the idea that you care about this sort of heroism, that sort of, and it presents it as an ideal to society. Like, it's not easy to become a billionaire in this society. You either have to really work hard, or, and now you're creating another path to it, you display this sort of transcendental valor that you're willing to sacrifice and risk your life for your fellow soldiers, you show all society that you value that. I mean, you make a difference on a societal level. And another thing I would say, this comes from a friend of mine, Darjeeling, so shout out. You're getting the point of those commercials wrong. It's not to show we want more gays in the military or whatever. It's to show Democratic Congress, we agree with your ideals. We agree with your ideals. Now, please give us $10 trillion more for NGAD, just stuff like that. Give us a lot of money, please.
I could see that.
We're displaying our loyalty.
Yeah.
Just to be clear about my friend, by the way, what he wrote was that the testing standards in general have decreased. So just so you know, I don't have any problem at all with having more women in the military. My problem is that don't lower the standards for people who have to do specific things, for people who have to have a specific level of strength. It doesn't matter if it's a man or woman or whatever who would go in there. The point is that that still has to be the same. If there are certain positions that don't require that level of strength, that's a different story. But that's why I'm not seeing that as being that good. Hopefully it's going to change, and it's a temporary thing right now.
Sure, but the point is you can't judge a military on the back of whatever advertising campaign it's running.
Sure, no, I agree there.
I guess that was my more fundamental point. I mean, but the point is like the Russian military adverts obviously appeals to a very masculine aspect, which is probably linked to like Russian culture or something, I guess. But like, I don't know the reality on the ground, but from accounts, it seems like Russia are getting fucked pretty hard in Ukraine. So, it doesn't really seem to line up with these masculine adverts that they're putting out,
No, it doesn't. And another thing that they do is they bring in people who are from the outlying parts of Russia, people who are from the boonies, basically, who don't have basic creature comforts that we're used to. So one of the things they do is they would steal the washing machines and the dryers, and they would steal all the stuff that they themselves don't have in their hometown from Ukraine and escape out of there. That is the reason why, there's all that looting going on.
One of the things I would say is, there's absolutely, the technology and the experience and the doctrine matter, and we've seen that lacking in the Russian invasion. But one thing that also matters, in my mind, is like, why are people joined? Like, what are they motivated for? Like, if you went around and you asked, new trainees going through boot camp or stuff like that in America, I don't know how many people you'd find there as a percentage that were motivated by like, I want to fight, or I really love America, or stuff like that. And most of them would probably just say, I'm here for the free college. I'm here for whatever. And that does create a different level of combat competence, I guess. Maybe. I mean,
I don't think it works for the Russians, though.
Yeah, that's also true for the Russians. Keep in mind, but like how you advertise is what you attract to a certain extent. So it matters to a certain extent, but it doesn't matter to the extent that like some pro-Russian podcasters would have to think about.
Sure. But it does go back to the idea, I think, of the elites having a role in setting a certain tone for society. Where, for example, on 4chan, a lot of people like to write about how they believe that the advertising that they see today, all the woke stuff, that this is just demoralization and it's intentional. I personally don't see it that way. I see it as people wanting to make money and thinking that this is the best way to make money at the moment. But when it does come to that role of motivating people, of having a good morale in society, what role do you think the elites should play in that? And would it really work today when we have the internet and it's just mostly lowest common denominator crap that most people are going to be entertaining in the first place? They were not going to have any patience for listening to some fucking George Washington speech or whatever. Like, do you see some, just what do you think of that?
Okay, well, when we say the elites, which particular elites are we discussing? Let's cut to the chase.
Sure. I mean, I would say all the way from like the people like Rockefellers, for example, to people who are in positions of power in various cultural institutions.
Are we talking about the Jews?
Oh, fuck.
No. We're not no, because first of all, if I don't want to go on that tangent, I've had enough with the previous person who I've had on with BTR. Gnostic, you know what I'm talking about here.
Well, that's probably why Chud thought you were going there. You might have a reputation of that now. I'm not
I'm just fucking around. Okay, I just want to be a good meme. Yeah. But you've had some anti-Semite guy on before of you, and it's caused some problems.
Yeah. No, and that's a problem. People actually think that like there's some like Zionist cabal behind the scenes pushing. It's just complete. It's flat earth shit, really.
The way that I, being a fellow man with the small hat, even though I'm not wearing it, it's invisible. My hat is on me. It's just invisible right now. The way that I would say it is, I think that especially in an urban environment with the culture that's prevalent right now and that's been prevalent back in the 30s with Stalinism, for instance, you would have intellectuals who would advocate for really shitty policy. And if you were an intellectual who would be the outsider, you would be frowned upon and you would be excluded from most of the intelligentsia circles. That's the way it used to be. Right now with the internet, that's not the case. So when people see competent people from certain demographics rising up the ranks, what they fail to see are all the people who have absolutely zero to do with them, but would never even be able to go into the room and talk with them because they would not be welcome. That's the position that I find myself in, and other people who are of my ethnicity, for example, who are very much against a lot of this woke stuff. And there are people right now, like Barry Weiss, for instance, and others who are starting to rise up against this. And I am noticing more people speak up. So my hope is that that perception that people have on the internet will start to change over time, but it's important just to have an open discourse about it. Like, that's why I don't even care about any of the anti-Semitic stuff that would get posted, because people always want to pin all their problems on a scapegoat. And it is important to have all those things be addressed. But anyway, that's just my little rant, little spiel about that whole thing.
No, that's cool. Yeah, so, I mean, the thing is like, the intelligentsia, the elite, like, they are legitimate in terms of, you know, they've studied something and they've come to some understanding. I think that there is, like, man, I don't know if this would even get me in trouble here with my peers. It might. I think there's been a watering down of, like, what the intelligentsia is, you know? And look, I'm all up for having, like, a conversation about gender or whatever it may be, but I think that having these codified sometimes in, like, formal education structures, you know, it becomes a bit Mickey Mouse for my liking. Do you know what I mean? And, you know, there's definitely this tendency, this kind of liberal academia tendency now, where there's this very kind of elitist attitude that people have, people look down upon. And if you don't go along with, like, you know, whatever the conception is, you know, if you don't think that, you know, classical music is white supremacist or some shit, you know, you kind of look down upon as being a bit of a fool, a bit of an idiot or something. And, you know, some of these concepts and stuff that people just look at and go, this is fucking stupid. I don't think that's reasonable. Anyway, sorry.
Well, I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here. Just a
go for it.
Side note, and then I'll get back to that. First, a side note. I would like to call out Twitch chat for being completely dead. There's 61 of you and 63 people on the YouTube chat, but YouTube chat is giving us all the comments and all the super chats. So
I think that's because follower only mode is on.
Yeah, that's your audience, Chud. I mean, they're just disappointing.
No, anyways, because follow only mode is on. Okay, don't worry, it's all good.
Yeah. Anyways,
thank you.
What are they? The academia has done reasonably intelligent things recently, like when the 1619 Project was completely discredited by the historian academia institutions. That was, in my view, a pretty good demonstration of the decent degree of integrity that they still have.
Yeah,
I think stuff should be interrogated, sure. You know. And,
no, I agreed with you on that. Like the 16, like we're trying. It looks like people are trying to, like, blame people for things that we have no control over in the past and sort of bring it up to the forefront, even before this was even considered the United States. Like, and so academia did its job. The debated that thing out, got to a decision about it, and yeah, that's how it should be done. I agree with that.
But this is also why I think, or at least I hope, that a lot of the people in the Ivies, they are just LARPing. They are pretending to have certain points of view for the present time, just so they're not going to be persecuted by people who would do the equivalent of flinging their own shit at you. That, I think, is the situation a lot of people in academia find themselves in, because a lot of them are scared. A lot of them are scared of saying anything that would be contrary to, you know, they would be scared of saying anything that would get them in trouble by a loud minority of blue-haired people online. And at a certain point, I don't blame them, but I think that there are people, you know, I've met people who are within these much more elite circles who went to really prestigious schools, and they're not really fans of this stuff. They know that they're under a lot of pressure. I think they do get a good talking to from their family about what it means to be a leader, what it means to run the world. And I doubt that they take a lot of, like, I doubt the skull and bones people take a lot of the woke stuff seriously. But I think that they're putting on a certain image just right now, just like people would put on the image of being a fan of the USSR and Stalin, during the 30s.
A lot of this woke boogeyman stuff can be a straw man. People take the worst. They found the worst people, like the libs on TikTok, Twitter page, whatever. They find the worst example of some person. Some of them you don't even know if it's legit or not. It just could be somebody just pretending to be a lib. Who knows? I'm just saying. But what I'm saying is, a lot of this stuff becomes a straw man. It doesn't. These people don't represent the majority of people on the left. They're not. Everybody doesn't have this insane mentality of like, what people think of that. And the same thing can be said about people on the right. I can find Kenneth Copeland and be like, look at this Kenneth Copeland guy. This is all right wingers are Kenneth Copeland. Like it's pointless to do that, I think.
One thing that I would say to Lev's earlier point about, the elites and the skull and bone people is, if you look at society, you see that the old elite, the country club, the WASP is dying off, and they're sort of losing their power, and the social structures that people would be raised through those old Boston Brahma people, they're going away. I mean, so I don't know what you're going to see emerge as the natural wealth-based aristocracy, but that's another social structure that we're seeing leave us, and that's...
Wait, why do you think they're going away, though? Is it like the birthing rates, or what exactly would attribute them to not being as prevalent as they were before?
I mean, you just see more power coming to people that come from outside these institutions, that come from more urban backgrounds, and through the think tanks, through the actual positions in Congress and such, you see more outsiders to the standard, I'll go to this particular prep school and then go through a particular Ivy and then arrive at my position in power. I mean, you see those sort of pathways becoming less and less relevant. And they're still there. But, I mean, the Boston Brahmin and all that are less powerful. I mean, you look at Silicon Valley. That's a large amount of wealth that doesn't come from any, old money institution. And so it's important to realize that the balance of power is shifting away from the institutions that were designed to cultivate people to handle power well. And new institutions are going to have to come up to sort of groom people for success in that way. And we're not seeing that yet.
That's a good point that you're bringing up. And when it comes to a lot of the technocratic people out there, it seems like we have two camps. We have like the Elon Musks of the world, and we have the, he's such a meme already, but like the Klaus Schwab, Great Reset, World Economic Forum people. What is your take, and for everybody as well here, not just the facts, but Chud and Gnostic, what are your takes on the Great Reset people, that whole bunch?
I mean, I don't know, man. I don't, honestly, I haven't looked a lot into it. I think that on a very base reading, I mean, I don't know, man. I think people overreact to it. I think there's a lot of conspiracies that crop out around it. I think that people take what is probably not that big a deal and elaborate into like, oh, they want us to live in the pod. They want us to eat the bugs. Which is a funny meme, and yeah, there's definitely some concerning things I've seen in regards to like the eating of the bugs and shit. I'm not up for eating bugs, but I think it gets overstated and it's used to sort of, back up whatever crazy bullshit conspiracy shit they want to push. But I'm sure there's some valid criticisms of it that exist.
So basically the World Economic Forum it's not that relevant. It's where the top economists from all over the universities in the world, they come together and they basically do what I did in that video that we were talking about earlier. They design what's the ideal economic system to maximize growth without taking into account many other considerations or, talking about how to get there and stuff like that, or considering, the preferences of the people. It's just, a bunch of theory jerking, basically. And then you have some heads of state who are there and they, they take notes and they realize, maybe a toned down version of that would be moderately useful in our society. But by no means are the levers of power decided at Davos. I mean, it's just the economists come together and they make suggestions. They talk about this would be ideal. But, in terms of actually translating that into what becomes real, that is not their purview. They don't have that power. And no one with that power is listening to them totally.
And I think the idea of sort of wanting to reestablish how the wealth is being passed down from, generational wealth being passed down from generation to generation, and people on the bottom are really stuck in this situation that's really hard to climb out of. The idea of addressing that, to me, is important. Whether you think that the means of getting there, you think it's equity versus equality of opportunity, I understand all that. And those are good criticisms, but I think that's still something that should be addressed and talked about and figured out as well.
But the problem is that not so much the people who I agree with just the facts, they like to drink a lot and to go to these conferences and schmooze, but mostly I don't see their ideas as being something that's going to be implemented to the T. The problem, though, is people who may be looking at what's happening in China today, the social credit system and all that, and seeing a great potential for controlling people through that method, and how, I'm not going to say stupid, but how short attention span people are going to get to the extent that those potential technocratic elites in the future would be able to gain control, and what exactly would be the way that that would be stopped. Because just the facts, one of the things that you were talking about in your video about the United States is how you were talking about Wall Street preventing there from being any offensive thing towards China because of how much Wall Street relies on China. So I see in the similar vein there being possibly certain people that would come up and try and control people through the social credit system with the help of China or whatever. I don't know. That is, again, just fantasizing about certain things that may or may not happen, but how much do you see that as being a possibility?
I mean, in the West, we have a lot of checks and balances against stuff like that. You know, the biggest check that I would have to imagine is the general deadlocked nature of our legislature. Something like that, you know, a big social credit system is going to be nearly impossible to get through Congress just because of how difficult it is to get anything meaningful through Congress. I mean, you're talking about a massive change to all society. That's a pipe dream with the current legislative system. So I wouldn't be too worried. And not to mention that it would be extremely unpopular, and I just don't see it happening, really. Not in America, at least. It maybe in Europe or something like that. You know, there are countries like Germany, Belgium, you know, maybe. And hey, even the Netherlands, they got that land grab through their legislatures, presumably. I don't know if that was totally executive action or not. But anyways, the point is there are some countries in Europe that could do that, but I don't see America doing it anytime soon.
I tend to agree. Chud Logic, do you agree?
Agree. Sorry, I missed it. Agree with what?
Agree with America's political system being so hard to get something so draconian to be implemented through it that Europe, especially Germany, would be far more likely to have some kind of a social credit system being enacted as opposed to the United States. I'm curious about England as well, by the way, since you're from merry old England.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's checks and balances that exist in our government too. So we've got like the House of Lords, which actually might be somewhat getting closer to what Just the Facts wants, because in some cases it's hereditary, in some cases it's by appointment. It's not an elected body, but they have, you know, some leeway, so they can look over a bill, they can knock it back to Parliament if they want to. So, you know, I don't think it's quite as simple as I don't know the structure of every legislative body in Europe, to be honest with you.
Can I ask you, has there ever been in the recent times, let's say in the last 50 years, 60 years, has the Queen ever put her hand down and stopped something from happening, or did anything political, or she just not
well, actually there was one time technically in Australia, if I remember correctly, they weren't able to get a budget passed. They went into government shutdown, and if I recall correctly, they had the whole country basically taken over by the governor, like by a governor general. But if I'm fuzzy on the details on that. I don't know if it happened in the last 50 years, so that's my maybe to your.
Okay, I don't understand. I was asking that because the more Just the Facts describes his ideal government, I'm almost like is he describing England right now? Like it sort of sounds like he is.
The ideas that I appeal to do have basis in history. That's why I cite Aristotle, and the English read the Greeks. The House of Lords is definitely close to what I want, but the thing is, first of all, today it's totally neuter. They haven't done anything really important in a long time. Second thing I would say is it's hereditary, and I want it, selected by like the experts. Government by the few is important, but I don't put stock in the idea of a broader hereditary nobility caste, sort of. But you know, it's definitely inspired by that. So that would be my answer.
Yeah, I guess the thing is you know, I would imagine that most, certainly Western nations, you know, the good part of the world, would have some sort of legislative breaks that prevent stuff from just going through and becoming law without sort of adequate checks and balances, I would imagine. So I think it's kind of built into every political system at this point, unless you're in some fucking crazy backwards nation somewhere. I don't know, maybe there you might have that.
I mean, in practice, though, if something gets through the House of Commons, it doesn't really stop after that. Like, in theory, the House of Lords can stop things, but it doesn't do it that often. And the Queen doesn't ever do anything, or the King, God save him, doesn't do anything like that. And it's just the House of Commons and the Prime Minister at this point, pretty much, isn't it?
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, well, because there's such a big majority at the moment. Yeah, I mean, you know, they're essentially able to put forward pretty much any legislation they can dream up. Mainly, I mean, you have to get all the Conservatives to get on board and not have any kind of rebel Conservative members of Parliament voting against it. So if they suggested something fucking crazy that was say, or something that was antithetical to Conservative principles, you might have a lot more rebellion on that front. But you know, I do think the House of Lords serves some function. You know, off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you policy they've knocked back recently. Or asked to be amended, but they do serve, you know, some sort of role. So I don't think it's quite as simple as, you know, they can just pass whatever they want, right? I think there is still a level of checks and balance, and you know, obviously, you know, having to make sure that every Conservative is voting in the same way is important too. Yeah.
Interesting. So from here, I think we're going to go right into the super chats. And before we do so, a couple of things. Number one, Chud Logic, I've noticed that there has been an absence of movement from your very stoic wrestler avatar. Do you still have the technology to make your character move around like the furry or whoever? I don't know.
I think I do, but I think it's been switched off this whole time. So hang on a second.
He's become a VTuber now?
Oh, it's been like that for quite some time.
Hey, Lev, before you go to Super Chat, can I share my screen for a second? I want to show you.
Absolutely. Let me just make sure. Yeah, try and share it. Here we go.
I made this when I was in college. I don't know if you guys are familiar with these compasses.
What's this? Oh wait, hold on. Let me move this so that everybody sees it. So here we go.
Compass. This is I custom made this one. It was blank when I got it. And this is where I feel things line up as far as ideas. And then you can see in the middle, on the bottom, in the middle, and the greens, Neil, that's me. That's where I just put myself right there.
Oh, damn.
The thing about political compasses in general, and I used to be into these for a while, like a couple of years back, is they just dramatically oversimplify things in general. Absolutely. Like there's so much more than two axes to politics.
I agree.
Are you an alt-right or a lib-left? And it's just like, oh god, the memes get terrible, and it's just
I just wanted to
funny colors on everything, and it's just awful.
Well, it's just trying to like categorize.
Damn, just totally shit on his idea. Nice one. What the
fuck? that was years of pent up and held back anger. I'm sorry. I've just seen that shit get so popular, like hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and it's just like.
Well, I've seen people make those, and they're just like completely off, and then just like throwing people in places where they should not be, and I just felt like they come out. You know? But I do agree that it's
you said it. You had the top left as Stalin, obviously, you know, and it was like, what did it say? It said like, as long as everyone's equal, it doesn't matter if people are poor. I'm not sure that's truly the sentiment of like an authoritarian.
Well, I've had 4 of those. They're all jokes. They're all
okay. Oh, it's all memes. Okay,
you see the one on the bottom left. It's we should all just live in nature. And then the bottom right was get off my lawn or I'll shoot you. Like it's like complete right wing, no government, and like just complete like libertarianism.
Do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, those two things, they can interact with each other, living in nature on your lawn and making sure nobody gets on it. But we are going to go to Super Chats right now, and I just want to thank all of you guys for being here, for doing this, Just the Facts. I would definitely love for you to come back, man. You were really awesome to have on and talk. And how was your general experience of being on the stream for the first time?
Oh, it was great. Thanks. This is the first time I've done any sort of live collaborative stuff like this. I've had offers for debates before, but... yeah, it went pretty well.
Yeah, I don't even think this was a debate as much as a conversation that
definitely was at some points.
Some points, yeah. Well, that's the nature of conversations. What is a conversation without any kind of contentiousness at certain points, right? That would just be boring. But anyway, we're going to go to Super Chats. Before that, everybody who is watching this, subscribe right now. Smash that subscribe button. Smash that like button. BTR is going to grow, and it's going to grow with your help. BTR is bringing everybody from the internet together who would never have a chance to speak with the other person to begin with. So we are popping the bubbles. We're bringing sides together, even though Chud and Just the Facts had a bit of a heated exchange earlier on. I think that as time went on, you guys got to know each other a little bit, and who knows, maybe you guys are going to meet up in real life at that conference and become the best of friends, and Neil can join you.
To be honest with you, Just the Facts doesn't. I mean, I didn't think they were like a super hardline far right type person, but. Yeah, I don't know. Like, obviously, they've just got different ideas. And,
it's working now.
Yeah, there we go. Now I see your wrestler doing his breathing and moves.
Yes,
excellent. All right. So, and one other thing, click the bell. Oh, look at that
the whole time. That would have been sick.
Oh, man. Okay, next time. So listen, everybody, click the bell. The bell is extremely important for growth. And also, for all the people who are here from the Discord, Break the Rules has its own Discord server, and here is the link to the Discord server. I put it in the chat right now. Join the Discord server right now. Same for Chud's people. Join the Discord server. We're going to have a lot of great times there. Anyway, next to the Super Chats, finally, we got a Toucan. I wonder if he's related to Toucan Sam. Toucan, $2. Dark Brandon will lead us to Hyperborea. I don't know. Any comments on that? Well, speaking of Hyperborea,
is a mythological land that Herodotus talked about. It's supposed to be like where Germany is. They didn't know much about it, so he just made up this idea of the Hyperboreans. And there's people with one eye up there, and there's gold guarding griffins flying around. Like, it was completely made up. Yeah,
sounds pretty chill.
Uses that. It says, we are Hyperboreans, as is like sort of a polemic against the Christian world.
Yeah, I imagine Hyperboreans would be like just like a league of incredibly boring people that would just bore you to death. They're like hyper boring. But anyway, Azov, I guess of the battalion, $2. I will send 50 next if Just the Facts thug shakes on camera. What is it?
Look, anything that comes from Azov, you can basically ignore. All right.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for the super chat, regardless, Azov. But anyway, Darjeeling
both
Fed.
My people, by the way, for now.
All right.
2 for 2, they're both mine.
Okay, let's see how Chud goes. This is a contest. Let's see if the Chud people can. Well, anyway, Darjeeling Fed, €5. We will establish the caliphate of facts in Agartha. Trust the plan. Another reference, Gnostic. We're going to be talking about Agartha soon, I hope. It's a very fascinating subject. The Inner Earth, Operation High Jump, all that good stuff. Admiral Byrd going in there, meeting the giants. Anyway, another one from the Toucan, $5. Epstein was one of the guards to heaven. If you know this.
We're 4 for 4. It's all mine.
Yeah, another one from Toucan. JTF is QAnon, by the way. All right.
Do you understand?
Yeah, like you said before about Azov, I'm going to respect you since you are here. You're the guest of honor. But another $2 from Azov. I appreciate it. Sorry, Azov, but just the facts. Anyway, Darjeeling Fed, €2. Yeah. Do you support Yakub and his Legion of Albinos?
Oh my god, these memes are great.
Another one from Toucan, $2. When the war starts, I will become a devout Favcist. I don't know what
Fauciist. And if you look at his avatar, it's like people have this meme now of making Fauci the Giga Chad, like as a reaction to that stuff. Like I'm hyper-vaxxed and stuff like that. So
interesting.
Yeah,
by the way, I think we still got to be careful about that particular subject for the sake of the YouTube algorithm. I don't know, but okay. Let's.
I mean, what's the problem? They're saying we should get gigavaxxed. I mean, surely they've got to be happy with getting over-vaccinated.
Oh, yeah.
Mm. Yeah. All right, another one from the Great Bird Toucan, $2. See, again, like I can't say this one because of the reasons why I said, but it's basically what you just talked about. Anyway, so Toucan, another one. Again, It's the same thing you were talking about. So thank you so much, Toucan, for another $2. But I have to be careful with the YouTube algorithm. Lunatic Cultist, $5. JTF is thoroughly bug breaking all of you. All right, is that another one of your people?
Many people are saying this. Yeah. Thanks, buddy. That is one of mine.
Nice. Darjeeling back at it with €2. Twitch cells be seething over YouTube chats. All right, and finally, 2 super chats from Glow in the Dark. The first one is $10. I think much of what is wrong with institutions is they're insecure and claim fame from others. An example, I would say, is they reject the great man of theory argument, yet many examples are evident. Yeah, that is something you were talking about, the great man theory. Chud, what do you think of the great man theory of history? And then I would love to hear from Gnostic and Just the Fact.
Well, I mean, being... largely looking at things from a Marxoid lens, I reject the concept of that completely. I think that,
oh man, I forgot you're in Marxism, right? Like you're into Marxism, so.
Yeah, as a lens of analysis, yeah. I don't like calling myself.
We got to do this. Just the facts. You have to. You have to now.
Not in the remaining 8 minutes. You said until you said we wouldn't go beyond 2 hours, and we can't cover that in 2 minutes. At some point, yeah.
Okay, we got to do another one then, talking about
good.
Marxism. Okay, that would be amazing. All right, but anyway, I cut you off.
Yeah, I mean, sure. Yeah, I would reject the great man theory of history. I think that history would largely proceed as we've seen with different people in the roles that we've seen. I mean, yeah, I just don't agree with it as a concept. I think there's people who, maybe have some level of influence, but I think that is also in itself influenced by their own material factors and their own material influences. So yeah, that's my basic take on it, I guess.
All right, I guess if there's any teaser for a potential future stream that you want to mention, Just the Facts regarding what Chud said, let me know.
Yeah, I definitely do place a lot more weight on sort of immaterial factors, and I think if you look at wars like the Crusades, it's definitely easy to see the non-material motivations for going on those wars, and in fact, the material motivations to stay home. I don't see. I mean, material factors are maybe one of the drivers of history, but I think, God, it's difficult to get into this without getting too esoteric, and getting Gnostic to completely destroy me with facts and logic. But yeah, I guess we'll have to see it some other time who comes out on top in that discussion.
All right, and next we have... Wait, what? Oh, I think that's the echo again. But next we have over here Glow in the Dark for $5. A nation by committee will have similar problems as an story or IP will have by committee. An story, is that like an hero? But anyway, any thoughts on that?
I mean, it's the same thing as yeah, it will. You need decisive leadership at some point. But the problem is, if I screw up the ending to a story, millions won't die. So, whereas if I'm the single auteur that leads the nation and I screw up, maybe millions more will die. So it's a bit okay for things to be MCU level bland in running a country, because that's much more tolerable. There's lower consequences for things being bland, but there are much higher consequences to screwing up.
And next we have Darjeeling Fed, #FreeAzov. Next we have Toucan, $2. JTF should give me a role in Discord for dis. Well, that's up to you. I'm not running your Discord, but I am running the BTR Discord. Speaking of which, one more time, here's the link to the BTR Discord. Everybody sign up there as well. And lastly, Darjeeling Fed, Azov be like, I can to Kiev. Well, I'm glad you spelled Kiev correctly. I appreciate that. I've been noticing some people saying the Ukraine and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, listen, this is the end of the stream. I really appreciate Chud Logic, Just the Facts, the great and powerful Gnostic Informant, who's going to be on very soon. We got a few streams planned together, right? I know if we should announce it right. You know what? Let's announce it right now. Sure. Because he said yes. We are going to have Jason Georgiani on Break the Rules all the way live. This is happening 2 weeks from now. And next week, Styx Hexenhammer 666 is back with us to debate a lady from the Young Turks on unions. So for all the
that one too.
No, that one. There's too many cooks in the kitchen already for that one. There's going to be kills. Yeah, no problem. And we are going to have a lot of fun in all these streams. And once again, patreon.com/breaktherules. Become a patron today, and you are going to get these exquisitely beautiful magnets. My father created these wooden magnets. They are made out of high quality wood. And believe me, you are going to cherish these because this is like real handcrafted stuff. You know, this is not just like some cheap stuff that you would buy from China or whatever. You know, this is like real stuff that has soul in it. So patreon.com/
magnets that fell from heaven. They're magic.
Exactly. Patreon.com/breaktherules. This is where you go and you're going to get these beautiful magnets, and that is for the $20 tier. For the $5 tier, when you become a patron, you are going to get MP3s of the episodes after they come out. You are going to get exclusive Patreon-only episodes. Listen, as BTR grows, as you guys subscribe more, as this whole thing develops, we're going to have a lot more Patreon-only episodes as well, Patreon exclusive, so those are coming very soon. And also, you're going to get an exclusive like Discord perk on the BTR Discord, a special Discord status. And for the $50 subscribers on Patreon, you are going to get a custom magnet. Whatever design you want, it is going to be custom, well, within limits, you know, no pornography or like any hate imagery or anything like that. But anyway, you get the idea. Become a Patreon today, and you are not going to regret it. And any final thoughts? Just the facts, Chud Logic, Gnostic Informant, as well as where can people find you for those who do not know where to find you?
So my first thought is, apart from Glow the Dark, I'm pretty sure every single person that super chatted was one of mine. So, seethe. Second of all, can find me on YouTube. That's basically where I'm at. I'm also on Discord. Don't have a custom invite anymore, but it's in the Discord. But it's in all the YouTube video descriptions. So yeah, subscribe, hit the bell button. Yeah.
Sweet.
Okay.
Chud Logic. Oh,
I just want to say the reason there wasn't any super chats from my community is all a bunch of layabout, bed-blob leftists. You can't be fucked to work, so my apologies for that. But yeah, thanks for having me on. I've had a fun convo. Find me at Chudlogic on all good social media platforms.
Always a pleasure. And Neil, you're gonna end this thing.
YouTube.com/Gnostic Informant. There it is.
Excellent. All right. We are off. Thank you guys so much for watching.